There is a pattern happening inside almost every company on Earth right now, and most people never notice it until it is too late. It is not a conspiracy. It is not laziness. It is not even bad luck. It is something far more predictable than any of that. Something so built into the way organizations work that once you understand it, you will never look at your career or your boss the same way again. Here is what I want you to think about for a moment. Have you ever sat across from a manager and thought, how did this person end up in charge? They miss deadlines. They give contradictory instructions. They take credit for wins and disappear when things go wrong. And somehow, they just keep sitting in that seat, year after year, project after project, while the people doing the actual work are quietly suffocating beneath them. You probably assumed it was politics, or nepotism, or some cosmic injustice that good systems occasionally produce. But what if I told you there is a name for exactly what you are watching? What if I told you that a man figured this out over 50 years ago, wrote it down in a book, and the world largely ignored it because the conclusion was too uncomfortable to accept? Stay with me, because what you are about to hear is going to reframe every job you have ever had, every promotion you have ever wanted, and every leader you have ever followed. In 1969, a Canadian educator named Laurence J. Peter published a book with a deceptively simple title, The Peter Principle. He had spent years studying hierarchies, schools, hospitals, government agencies, corporations, and what he found was not what anyone expected. In fact, the conclusion he reached was so counterintuitive that his publisher initially rejected the manuscript multiple times. The core idea, once you hear it, feels almost obvious. But obvious in the way that gravity feels obvious once someone explains it to you, not before. Here it is. In any hierarchy, any organization where people can be promoted based on performance, employees tend to rise to the level of their own incompetence. Read that again. Not to the level of their greatest strength. Not to the level where they do their best work. To the level where they are no longer good at what they do. And then they stop there. Permanently. Peter argued that promotion systems, as they are almost universally designed, have a fatal flaw baked directly into them. When someone is exceptional at their current job, the natural response of the organization is to promote them. Congratulations, you are so good at this thing that we are going to give you an entirely different thing to do. And this cycle repeats, promotion after promotion, until eventually the person lands in a role where they are not exceptional, where they are, in fact, struggling. And because they are struggling, they stop being promoted. They stay. The result? Over time, every position in a hierarchy tends to be filled by someone who is not quite competent enough to hold it. The people who were great at their old jobs are now managing people who are doing those jobs. And they are not great at managing. They were never trained for it. They were never evaluated on it. They were promoted because of something entirely different. This is not a rare edge case. Peter argued, and decades of research have since supported, that this is the default outcome of how promotion works. Now, I want to pause here because I know what some of you are thinking. Surely organizations catch this. Surely they notice when someone is underperforming and either retrain them or move them out. And in theory, yes, that is exactly what should happen. In practice, almost never. Here is why. When someone is promoted into incompetence, they do not immediately collapse. The slide is gradual. For a while, they coast on the skills and reputation that got them promoted in the first place. They look like they know what they're doing because in their previous role, they genuinely did. The organization has already publicly committed to their success by promoting them. Reversing the decision is embarrassing and expensive, and so the system protects them. There is also something else at play here. Something deeply human. When a person reaches their level of incompetence, they do not tend to acknowledge it. Most people, when placed in a role beyond their abilities, do not think, I am out of my depth. They think, this job is harder than it should be. They think, the people around me are not pulling their weight. They think, if only leadership would give me more resources, more authority, more time. The incompetence becomes invisible to the person experiencing it. And that invisibility is precisely what makes it so persistent. Let me give you a concrete example, not a fictional one, a pattern you have almost certainly watched play out in real life. Imagine a sales team. One salesperson on that team is extraordinary. They build relationships with clients naturally. They read the room. They know when to push and when to back off. Their numbers are consistently the highest in the department. Month after month, quarter after quarter, they are the benchmark everyone else is measured against. So, the company promotes them. They are now the sales manager. And this is where something quiet and irreversible begins to happen. Because being an exceptional salesperson requires a very specific set of skills: intuition, charm, individual drive, the ability to operate independently under pressure. Being an exceptional sales manager requires almost the opposite. It requires patience. The ability to coach people whose natural style looks nothing like yours. The ability to delegate rather than do. To build systems rather than rely on instinct. To measure success not through your own performance, but through the collective performance of people you are responsible for. These are not extensions of each other. They are separate disciplines. In many ways, they are in direct tension. And the former star salesperson, now sitting in the manager's chair, is lost. Not because they are not intelligent, not because they are not motivated, but because the job they are now being paid to do has almost nothing in common with the job they were being rewarded for. And while they are struggling to become something they were never designed to be, the sales team beneath them is suffering. Targets are being missed. Morale is slipping. And the company has lost two things at once: a great salesperson and a vacancy that now has the wrong person in it. This story plays out in engineering, in medicine, in law, in education, in government, across every sector, in every country, at every level of every hierarchy. The best nurse gets promoted to ward manager. The best teacher becomes a principal. The best coder gets handed a team. The best journalist becomes an editor. And in each case, the promotion removes them from the work they were great at and places them in work they were never evaluated for, often work they do not even want to do. Now here is where it gets more interesting, because the Peter Principle is not just a curiosity. It has measurable, real-world consequences that affect you, regardless of whether you are the one being promoted. A landmark study published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics in 2019 analyzed data from 214 companies and over 53,000 sales workers and their managers. The findings were striking. The single biggest predictor of who got promoted to sales manager was not leadership potential, not communication skills, not emotional intelligence. It was individual sales performance. The best salespeople were promoted consistently, systematically, almost automatically, regardless of whether they showed any capacity for management. And what happened next? The teams led by these high-performing turn managers had worse outcomes than teams led by managers who had been only average performers as salespeople. The promotion of a star performer was, on average, bad for the team they were now supposed to be leading. This is not a small finding. This is a fundamental indictment of how promotion decisions are made at scale. We are optimizing for the wrong variable, and the cost is being quietly distributed across every layer beneath the promoted individual. Think about what that means for you. If you are early in your career, you are likely being managed by someone who was promoted for reasons that have nothing to do with their ability to manage you. Your performance reviews, your development, your daily experience at work, all of it is being filtered through a person who was never selected for that role based on whether they could do it well. And if you are further along in your career, you may be looking at your own trajectory and wondering whether the next step is actually the right one. Whether the title and the salary increase are worth what you will have to give up and what you might be walking into. Laurence Peter was a sardonic man. His book is not a dry, academic text. It is laced with dark humor and some of the most quotable observations about work and human nature ever written. He noted, for instance, that work is accomplished by those employees who have not yet reached their level of incompetence. Think about that. The actual productive work of any organization is being done by the people still on their way up, not the people who have arrived. He also introduced what he called percussive sublimation, a term for what happens when an organization realizes someone has risen too high but cannot demote them. Instead, they are kicked upward, given a grander title, a corner office, a ceremonial role with no real authority. They are shuffled out of the way while the appearance of their success is maintained. You have seen this. You may have lived this. A person who is quietly moved sideways into a role that sounds impressive but accomplishes nothing. That is not an accident. That is the system managing its own failures without admitting to them. So what does this mean for you? What are you supposed to do with this information? First, I want to talk about something that almost no one discusses when they talk about the Peter Principle, and that is the cost to the individual at the center of it. Because it is easy to frame this as a systemic problem or a management failure. What it rarely gets discussed as is a human tragedy. When someone rises to their level of incompetence, they often know something is wrong. They feel it. The confidence that carried them through their previous roles starts to hollow out. They become defensive. They micromanage, not because they want to control people, but because control feels like the only thing standing between them and being exposed. They stop developing, because development requires admitting you do not know something, and admission feels dangerous when you are already uncertain about your position. They become, in other words, the kind of boss that other people hate working for. Not because they are bad people, but because the system placed them somewhere they were never equipped to be, gave them almost no support to get there, and then left them to survive however they could. The bad boss, in many cases, is not the villain of the story. They are the victim of a system that mistook their past success for universal competence. Understanding this does not mean tolerating poor leadership. It means approaching it with a more accurate lens. And a more accurate lens leads to better decisions about how you respond, how you manage upward, and critically, how you think about your own path. Because here is the question that really matters for anyone listening to this. At some point, you will be offered a promotion. Maybe you already have been. And the way most people think about promotions is almost entirely through the lens of reward. More money, more status, more recognition. Finally, proof that the work you have been putting in has been seen. But almost no one stops to ask the question that the Peter Principle demands you ask. Am I being promoted because I would be good at the new role? Or am I being promoted because I have been exceptional at this one? Those are not the same thing. And conflating them is exactly how people end up sitting in jobs that are slowly grinding them down, doing work that does not use their strengths, managing people in ways that feel unnatural, wondering at some quiet moment why success feels so much worse than they imagined it would. There is nothing inherently noble about chasing the next level. Sometimes the most strategically intelligent thing a person can do is to become the best in the world at the level they are already at, to become so valuable where they are that the organization cannot afford to move them, to trade the title for depth, the corner office for craft. This is not a message about settling. It is a message about self-awareness. The people who build genuinely great careers are not the ones who take every promotion offered. They are the ones who know the difference between an opportunity and a trap, and who have the clarity to tell them apart before accepting. Now, let us talk about organizations because they have an active role in this problem, and they have an equal responsibility to solve it. The most forward-thinking companies in the world have started to realize that the traditional promotion model is broken. That moving people up a management ladder is not the only way to recognize and retain exceptional performers. That what most high performers actually want is not a direct report. It is challenge, mastery, recognition, and financial reward. Some organizations have responded by building what they call dual career ladders, a technical track that runs parallel to the management track, where an engineer or a scientist or a designer can reach the very highest levels of seniority and compensation without ever managing a single person. They progress not by becoming a different kind of employee, but by becoming a deeper version of the one they already are. This is not a radical concept. It is, in fact, the obvious solution to a problem that most organizations have simply refused to look at directly. The military has long understood this. A brilliant field surgeon is not automatically made a general. A A gifted intelligence analyst is not automatically handed a division to command. Certain skills are recognized as elite on their own terms, without requiring the person who possesses them to abandon those skills in exchange for status. But in most of the corporate world, this logic has not penetrated. The org chart still moves in one direction, up and out, and everyone is expected to want to move along it. The employee who says, "I would rather stay in this role and go deeper," is often treated with suspicion. Like they lack ambition. Like something must be wrong. Nothing is wrong. That person might be the most strategically intelligent one in the room. There is one more dimension to the Peter Principle that rarely gets discussed, and I think it might be the most important one for where we are right now, economically and professionally. We are living through a period of extraordinary disruption. Entire job categories are being automated. The skills that made someone exceptional 10 years ago may be the same skills that are becoming obsolete today. And organizations are responding by restructuring, collapsing management layers, creating flatter hierarchies, distributing decision-making further down. In that environment, the Peter Principle operates in a new and even more dangerous way. Because in a rapidly changing landscape, even the people who are genuinely good at the level they currently occupy can find themselves outpaced. The competence that justified their position can erode, not because they were promoted past their abilities, but because the world moved and the role changed underneath them. They become, in Peter's terms, incompetent not through promotion but through stasis. Through the assumption that what worked yesterday will continue to work tomorrow. This means the question is no longer just, am I taking a role I can do? The deeper question is, am I continuing to grow faster than the role is changing around me? That is a different calculation entirely. And it demands a different kind of commitment, not just to performance but to perpetual, deliberate, uncomfortable learning. The people who will thrive in the next decade are not the ones who reach a level and settle into it. They are the ones who treat every level as a beginning, who build adaptability into their identity rather than their comfort into their position. I want to close with something that Laurence Peter himself might have appreciated, given how darkly comedic his worldview was. The Peter Principle is one of the most well-documented, thoroughly researched, repeatedly confirmed phenomena in the study of human organizations. It has been validated by economists, psychologists, sociologists, and management theorists for over 50 years. The evidence is not ambiguous. The mechanism is not complex. The solution, at least in outline, is not particularly mysterious. And yet, walk into almost any medium-sized company today. Look at how promotions are decided. Look at what criteria are being used. Look at who is being moved up and why. And you will find, with a frequency that should disturb you, that nothing has changed. The best salesperson is still being made the sales manager. The best programmer is still being handed a team. The best individual contributor is still being pulled out of the work they love and placed in a role they were never evaluated for. And the cycle continues. Quietly, persistently, at enormous cost to organizations and at enormous cost to the individuals trapped inside it. We know the problem. We have known it for half a century. The question is whether you, specifically, are going to let it happen to you. Because knowledge without action is just expensive entertainment. And now that you understand the mechanism, you have something most people never get, the ability to see the trap before you step in it. To evaluate a promotion not just as a reward, but as a role. To ask not just, do I deserve this, but am I built for this? To recognize when the organization's interest in moving you up is not the same as your interest in going. That clarity, more than any title or salary band, is the thing that actually protects a career. If this changed the way you see your work, even a little, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The person stuck under a bad manager. The high performer staring down a promotion decision. The leader who is quietly wondering how they ended up somewhere so far from what they were good at. And if you want to keep thinking differently about money, work, and the systems that shape both, you know where to find me.